My mother taught me how to shake a man's hand and keep my word. She never taught me what to do when the woman I married couldn't be bothered to drive her to the hospital. I didn't need her to teach me that one. Turns out I figured it out just fine on my own. Welcome to Dad's Pure Revenge. If you're new here, I'm glad you found us. Drop a comment and let me know what city you're watching from tonight. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't. Let's get into it. My mother's name is Eleanor Doyle, 82 years old, lives alone on Birchwood Lane in Fairview, Ohio, in the same house my father bought her in 1974. She still hangs her towels a certain way, folded in thirds, because that's how her own mother did it. She still calls me on Sunday mornings at exactly 9 o'clock, not 8:55, not 9:05, because she says a call before church is rude and a call after is forgotten. When I was 12 and broke my arm falling off the Petersons' shed, she drove me to St. Francis Hospital in her nightgown with a coat thrown over it, and didn't put on real clothes until I was out of the X-ray. When my father passed in 2011, she sold her wedding ring, not because she needed the money, but because she wanted to pay for his headstone herself, with something that was mine to give. Nobody in my family knew that, until the jeweler mentioned it at a funeral 3 years later. That's who we're talking about here. Just so you understand what kind of woman my wife told to figure it out. My name's Marcus Doyle. I'm 44. I run a small contracting business, mostly kitchen remodels and the occasional deck, out of a 2-bay garage on Maplewood Drive. I've been married to Denise for 11 years. And if I'm honest with you, and I'm going to be honest with you the whole way through this, my biggest flaw for most of those 11 years was that I let a lot of things slide. I told myself that was patience. It wasn't. It was fear dressed up nice. Tuesday, October 14th, 9:52 at night. My phone rings and it's my mother, and her voice isn't right. Thin, careful, like she's trying not to scare me, which of course scared me more than anything else could have. "Marcus, honey, I don't want you to worry," she said, "but I've got this pain in my chest and down my arm, and I think somebody ought to take me in." My truck, an 18 F-150, was up at Donnelly's Auto getting a transmission looked at. Had been there since Sunday. Denise's Lexus was sitting in our driveway. I found her in the kitchen with a glass of wine, scrolling her phone at the island. "Mom's having chest pains," I said. "I need your car. Mine's still at Donnelly's." She didn't even look up right away. "I've got that 7 a.m. flower delivery for the Hendersons' wedding tomorrow. I need the car ready to load at 6. Denise, she thinks it's her heart. She looked up then, set the phone down flat on the counter, screen side down, which I'd come to learn over 11 years meant she'd already made up her mind about something. "Not my problem, Marcus. Figure it out." 4 words, flat as a countertop. No shouting. If she'd shouted it, I think it would have hurt less. The quiet way she said it, like she was telling me we were out of coffee filters, that's the part that sat wrong in my stomach for a long time after. I didn't argue with her. I want you to notice that, because it matters later. I just said okay. I called Ray Pruitt, our neighbor 2 doors down, retired postal worker, up most nights anyway, because of his knees. Ray had his boots on before I finished the sentence. "That's what neighbors are for," he said, backing his Buick out of the driveway at 10:04 p.m., still in his robe, with jeans pulled on underneath it. He said it again in the parking lot of St. Francis at 10:31, when I tried to hand him gas money. "That's what neighbors are for, Marcus. Put your wallet away." Turned out to be angina, not a heart attack, but Dr. Patel wanted her held overnight for monitoring. I sat in a folding chair next to my mother's bed until almost 2 in the morning. She kept apologizing for the trouble. I kept telling her there wasn't any trouble. I didn't mention how we'd gotten there. I didn't examine what Denise had said yet. I just let it sit there in the corner of the room with us, the way you let a stain sit before you decide how bad it really is. I got home a little after 3. Denise was asleep, The house smelled like her wine glass, still out on the counter, a half-inch left in the bottom gone warm. I didn't wake her up to fight. I made coffee instead, and I sat at that same island in the dark, and for the first time in 11 years of marriage, I let myself actually think about her, clearly, without the fear of what it would mean if I didn't like what I found. Here's the thing I hadn't let myself add up until that night. 4 years ago, when Denise wanted to open her flower shop downtown, Bloom & Co., on Main Street, the bank wouldn't extend the loan without collateral. My mother, without me even asking her to, put up a certificate of deposit as a guarantee. $40,000 of my father's life insurance, sitting there as security so my wife could open a storefront. Eleanor Doyle never once brought it up at Thanksgiving. Never once said, "You're welcome." She just did it quietly, the way she does everything, and let Denise take all the credit for building something on her own. I wasn't angry sitting there at 3 in the morning. That's not honestly what it was. I was done. There's a difference, and if you've lived it, you know exactly what I mean. Anger burns hot, and it burns out. This was colder than that. This was a decision. Wednesday morning, 7:40. I drove out to Birchwood Lane before I went to St. Francis for visiting hours. I told my mother everything, not to turn her against Denise, but because she asked me straight, "Why didn't your wife bring you last night?" And I wasn't going to lie to that woman in a hospital bed. I told her the 4 words exactly as they'd been said. My mother didn't yell either. Funny how the people who love you and the people who don't both tend to go quiet at the worst moments, for completely different reasons. She just nodded slowly and said, "I see." "Then Marcus, hand me my address book off that nightstand, would you? I want to be clear about something here. My mother didn't scheme. She didn't call a lawyer to hurt anybody. She called First Fairview Bank at 9 a.m. that Wednesday and asked, as was entirely her right, to speak with the loan officer about withdrawing her collateral guarantee on the business line of credit for Bloom & Co. It was her money. It was her signature. She'd extended it in good faith, and good faith, once it's gone, doesn't legally owe anybody a second chance. The bank, per their own paperwork, is required to notify the primary account holder of any change in loan security within 1 business day. That call came in around 4 p.m. Wednesday to Denise's shop. I didn't find out about the calls until I checked my phone that evening. 11 missed calls from Denise. Then, over the next hour, 29. By the time I sat down for dinner alone at our kitchen island, 34. She had no idea yet that I already knew why. But she would. I let it climb to 38 before I finally picked up. Her voice wasn't flat this time. "Marcus, the bank says your mother pulled her CD. They're saying without it the credit line freezes. I've got a Henderson wedding order due Friday, and payroll on the 15th. What is going on?" "You told me it wasn't your problem," I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to, so I figured you'd want me to leave it alone. Figure it out yourself. Silence on the other end. A long one. "That's not, Marcus, that's not the same thing." "It's exactly the same thing," I said. "You just didn't think it'd ever come back around to you." She drove home that night, and we sat across from each other at that same island, and for the first time in a long while, I watched her actually struggle for words instead of setting her phone down flat and ending the conversation. She tried, "I didn't mean it like that." She tried, "You're punishing me for one bad night." She tried, finally, something close to an apology, though it arrived about 82 years too late for the woman it should have been about in the first place. I told her I wasn't punishing her. I told her the bank made its own decision and my mother made hers, and neither of them had done a single thing that wasn't fair, legal, and completely within their rights. I told her the only decision left in the room was mine, and I'd already made it standing in a hospital hallway at 2 in the morning while she slept off a glass of wine. I filed for divorce 11 days later. Nothing dramatic. Mr. Whitfield, my lawyer over on Route 9, handled it clean and quiet. Same as everything else in this story. Denise kept the shop, for what it's worth, found new investors. The Henderson wedding went off fine in the end. I don't wish her ill. I just don't wish her mine anymore. My mother's home now. Back on Birchwood Lane, back to hanging her towels in thirds. I drive out most Sundays before church, 9 o'clock sharp, and some mornings, Ray Pruitt's out on his porch in that same robe, and we just nod at each other across the yards. No words needed for what we both remember about that night in October. I picked her up last Sunday and the radio in my truck, fixed now, transmission good as new, was playing some old Bob Seger song, and the window was cracked, and the air coming in was that clean, honest kind of cold you only get in Ohio in late fall. My mother had her hand resting on the dash the way she always does, like she's steadying the whole truck herself. "You all right, Marcus?" she asked me, and I realized, driving her down Maplewood with the heater humming and nowhere I needed to be but exactly where I was, that I actually was. Not because anybody got what was coming to them, just because I'd finally stopped mistaking silence for peace. If somebody in your life ever tells you, figure it out yourself, you go ahead and do exactly that. Just make sure, when you're done figuring, that the person still standing next to you is somebody worth the trouble. That's the story. If it hit you the way it hit me writing it down, hit that like button, subscribe to Dad's Pure Revenge for more, and tell me down in the comments, who showed up for you when it mattered most? I read every one of them.